As the segments for the Simpsons Halloween special got longer and longer over the years, the original wraparounds that tied the stories together were dropped in favor of standalone cold openings that typically had interesting ideas behind them, but just weren't strong enough to build an entire 5 to 7 minute segment around. Treehouse of Horror 22, the third episode of the 23rd season, which first aired in October 2011, has one such opening. The special includes the segments The Diving Bell and the Butterball, a parody of the 2007 film The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, when Homer becomes a superhero despite being paralyzed. Del D for Diddly, a tribute to the TV series Dexter that sees Flanders become a serial killer, and in the Navi, a spoof of the 2009 film Avatar, in which Bart and Milhouse pose as the natives of an alien planet.
Are you guys gonna beat me up?
Nah, we can't.
These avatars cost $80 billion each!
The episode also has an extended opening that serves as a parody tribute to the 2010 film 127 Hours, which was based on the 2004 autobiography of Aron Ralston, Between a Rock and a Hard Place, about his experience being trapped by a boulder in an isolated slot canyon in southeastern Utah in April 2003. The title, 127 Hours, refers to the period of time between Ralston's arm getting trapped and his rescue. Overall, Treehouse of Horror 22 received mixed reviews, though the intro was critically acclaimed, given that the show managed to take a gruesome story that should have been beyond reproach and managed to make light of it without being disrespectful to the horrifying nature of Ralston's true life story.
The only sane thing to do is chew off my arm.
The Halloween special begins with a cold opening as Bart, Lisa, and Maggie return home with their haul after trick-or-treating. However, before the kids can enjoy their efforts, Marge confiscates their candy in order to give it to the army. In return for their treats, Marge gives her kids teeth-friendly items including a toothbrush and mouthwash. Strangely, Marge entrusts Homer to deliver the candy to the military the next day.
No sneaking off and eating that candy yourself.
Marge, you know I'd never do that.
Instead, predictably, Homer drives past the candy drop-off out into the desert to eat the treats in private. However, before he can do so, he falls into a canyon.
Skip to my loo, my... What the...
One of Homer's arms ends up pinned under a boulder, leaving him unable to reach the candy. He calls 911, who tell him they'll be there in 20 minutes, but Homer can't wait that long. Ultimately, he decides to gnaw off his arm, though he initially chews off his free arm and a leg before severing the correct appendage. Homer manages to reattach his free arm and gnaw off the trapped one. After getting himself loose, Homer opens the bag, only to discover that his kids have switched out the candy for vegetables. Homer screams in rage. Meanwhile, back at home, Bart, Lisa, and Maggie gorge themselves on their treats. Bart laughs, then opens his mouth to show the episode title spelled out in chewed-out candy. The entire Treehouse of Horror 22 episode was written by Caroline Omine and directed by Matthew Fawnin. At the time, Omine had been with The Simpsons since season 11 and had written a number of solid post-Golden Era episodes such as The Great Money Caper, the 7th episode of the 12th season, when Homer and Bart conspire to con Springfield's citizens out of money, which first aired in December 2000. And Dial In for Nerder, the 14th installment of the 19th season, when Bart and Lisa believe they accidentally killed Martin, that originally aired in March 2008.
Come on, wake up!
In regards to the Halloween specials, Omine's first experience was with Treehouse of Horror 11, the first episode of the 12th season, which first aired in November 2000. Omine wrote the second segment of the installment, Night of the Dolphin, a tribute to the 1963 film The Birds and the 1973 movie Day of the Dolphin, both of which are nature revenge stories when dolphins rise up against humankind.
If we speak in low-frequency voices, I don't think they can... Ow!
Omine later contributed to the Treehouse of Horror 12, the first episode of the 13th season that originally aired in November 2001. She wrote the third segment, Whiz Kids, a parody of the Harry Potter franchise.
Turn into a prince guy?
At the time, Fawnin had directed just one Halloween special, Treehouse of Horror 17, the fourth episode of the 18th season, which originally aired in November 2006. And it was the very first thing Fawnin ever directed for The Simpsons.
Hello, everybody.
Ultimately, given Omine and Fawnin's limited experience with the Halloween specials, the intro for Treehouse of Horror 22 isn't just decent, but it's also impressively layered. Like Ralston's real-life experience, the 127 Hours film is set in April 2003 in Utah's Canyonlands National Park as Ralston sets off hiking without thinking to tell anyone. During his trek, Ralston befriends two lost hikers and gives them directions before they invite him to a party the following night. Ralston accepts and says goodbye to the girls as they head home. Ralston is making his way through a slot canyon when a large boulder he's hanging from comes loose, trapping his right arm against the wall. Ralston attempts to move the boulder, but his efforts are futile. Given that he has his camcorder with him, Ralston decides to make a video diary in order to maintain his morale as he very slowly chips away parts of the boulder with a pocket knife. Over the next 5 days, Ralston rations his food and water and struggles to keep warm at night before he's ultimately forced to drink his urine to survive. Throughout the days, Ralston becomes desperate and depressed and begins to hallucinate about escaping while re-evaluating his current and past relationships. Ralston also has a vision of his future son, which, ultimately, is the thing that spurs his will to survive. And this leads him to apply a tourniquet on his trapped arm before breaking it and very slowly amputating the appendage. After he's finally free, Ralston wraps up the wound before leaving his days-long prison. Ralston soon spots a family on a hike and calls for help. They give him water and alert the authorities, who take him to hospital. A textual epilogue reveals that years later, Ralston did indeed have a son. Ultimately, despite relatively minor changes for narrative purposes, Ralston was impressed with the adaptation of his experience, finding it to be as close to a documentary as a fictional recreation could possibly be. And even though Ralston could have, understandably, found the Simpsons parody of his experience deeply offensive as it ostensibly made light of his profound suffering, Ralston was actually a big fan of the show's reimagining of his extreme survival story.
Copy that, sir. We'll be there in 20 minutes.
Given the horrifying nature of Ralston's real-life experience, the Simpsons parody could have turned out very badly. But Ralston was a fan, so much so that he was actively involved in the sequence's development as he guest starred as the 911 operator.
Hello, 911. I need a helicopter rescue and some cold milk.
Copy that, sir. We'll be there in 20 minutes.
What? I can't wait that long for candy!
Ralston even came up with his own scary name for the credits that made light of his circumstances, nicknaming himself Aaron. I gave my right arm to be on the Simpsons roll stump. Beyond 127 Hours, the opening for the Halloween special featured a number of other references. At the start of the sequence, when the Simpsons return home from trick-or-treating, Maggie, dressed as an alien, bursts out of Bart's chest. The scene is a reference to arguably the most iconic scene from the 1979 film Alien, about a crew who encounter an aggressive and deadly extraterrestrial loosed on their spacecraft. In one scene, an infant alien bursts out of one of the crew members' torso. Shortly after Marge tells the kids to give her their candy, it's revealed what Homer dressed as for Halloween, which is comic book character Dr. Manhattan from the Watchmen franchise, about an alternate history in which the existence of superheroes was revealed in the mid-20th century. Later in the sequence, when Homer drives past the candy drop-off, there's music from the 1960 film Psycho, based on the 1959 novel of the same name about a highly unusual motel manager. The inclusion of the music is a parody of a scene in the film in which a woman steals money and experiences extreme paranoia. The way in which Homer falls down a canyon is intentionally reminiscent of the classic scene from the 8th episode of the 2nd season of The Simpsons, Bart the Daredevil, when Bart begins doing stunts, which first aired in December 1990. At one point in the episode, Homer ends up falling down Springfield Gorge in excruciating detail. Overall, reviews for Treehouse of Horror 22 range from mixed to outright negative. The diving bell in the Butterball segment was considered weak. Del D for Diddley had a great premise, but failed to even come close to realizing the idea's true potential. And the best thing about the Avatar parody In the Na'vi is its title. Beyond that, the segment was both underwhelming and nonsensical as part of a Halloween special, given that it's not a horror story.
No thanks.
But there was praise for Treehouse of Horror 22's opening. For such a brief segment, the intro is impressively layered with various film references and parodies beyond just 127 hours. The very idea of loosely retelling Ralston's horrific real-life experience in a humorous horror-themed story sounds truly terrible and inappropriate. Yet, impressively, The Simpsons somehow managed to take Ralston's extreme but inspiring story of survival and make light of it with Ralston's help, resulting in one of the weirdest but genuinely entertaining tributes to one of the most extreme real-life examples of survival that you would never think could work as a comedy, but, in this one case, actually does.
Oops. No! Skip to my loo, my...